he was arrested for it. But at the time, my crew was arrested for it. My aircraft was impounded and the stuffing was taken out the cushions and all kinds of drama.
Oh
That
man.
was a call you want at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. By the way, he's been arrested. So have my crew.
And the plane is being torn to pieces.
I had to delay a flight once because the artist's eyelashes flew out the window of the car. He wound it down to smoke out the window, and we had to pause for an eye restyle that
So
was
an eyelash recovery operation.
there's,
I was trying so hard not to say that. I bet it was the tour manager, and then you said it. So yeah. Hello and welcome to the Noisemakers podcast. I'm your host, Liv Carter. Today, actually really excited because I know nothing about this industry. So we're going to get smarter together here. Speaking with Julie Black from Premier Aviation. Julie spent more than 20 years in the aviation industry. Started out in marketing and communications, then moved into VIP and executive charter services, which brought her to the world of artist tours, which is mainly what we're going to be talking about today. Quick caveat before we start, Julie. If anybody wants to listen to this episode to get like the gossip about artists on planes, that's not this podcast.
no,
We respect
absolutely.
artists here. No gossip, no names, maybe stories, but we're gonna be
We
professional.
can anonymize the gossip nicely.
Exactly. Welcome, Julie. Thank you so much for taking time.
Thank you so much for having me, Liv. It's exciting to be here with you. It's great to have the opportunity to talk about aviation and music together.
Does anybody have numbers on how large this business is?
In terms of overall charters around the world. But then, charters obviously encompass so many different aspects. We undertake charters
Exactly.
for crew on commercial airliners. We undertake artist parties on business jets and VIP airliners, but we also move backline on big freighters around the world as well. So
Yeah.
aviation is a vital part of the logistics for the live entertainment industry and has been for years. This isn't a new thing. I mean, most companies in our space have been doing what they're doing now for probably 40 plus years.
Yeah, and I remember in the 90s, a lot of the rock bands touring in the 90s, like the Bon Jovi tour, right? They had their plane wrapped in their
Yeah.
logo. Right? It's like these are obvious. They didn't buy it, I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
they're like flying billboards.
That would have been a charter that you just get wrapped. But
Yeah.
it was, yeah, this has been going on for a long time. It has to have been.
Yeah, I have to say, I loved those days back in the 90s when we were delivering planes and taking planes for like a year at a time and putting decals on them that matched the
Yeah,
tour,
yeah.
the album, whatever it was they were promoting at the time. It was hell for arranging a discreet arrival into anywhere because it
I
wasn't.
bet. Yeah.
But there were some stunning liveries out there. I mean, look at the Iron Maiden plane, that kind of thing. There were some fantastic.
Oh,
No big
didn't they
deal.
have one with like Eddie, like their
Yeah,
monster was like painted on the
absolutely.
plane?
Yeah, it's incredible. Those were the days when you could
Yeah,
take
yeah.
that length of time and just, yeah, turn it into a flying album cover. It was fantastic.
That's really cool. A question that I like asking people, what do people think your job is and what is actually your job?
Oh my God, it's so hard to describe my job. I think there's lots of people who make assumptions that, oh my God, you must make like tons of money doing what you do. I mean, first of all, we work in a really, really competitive environment.
Hmm.
It's a high visibility environment. You see an A-level artist going on tour. They're
Yeah.
big enough. Everyone wants to fly them. All the operators want to fly them. All the brokers want to fly them. So everyone's chasing that business down. So we work damned hard. I'd say I'm a logistician, I'm a meteorologist, I'm an in-flight
I didn't even think
catering.
of that. Yeah.
I'll arrange cars when you need cars. We're chief troubleshooter, and sometimes
Therapist, I'm
yeah,
assuming.
nanny, babysitter, therapist, baggage manager. I have a picture of me from a tour down in South America several years ago, and it kind of sums up my experience. I was stood on the ramp of an airport called Fortaleza in Brazil,
Hmm.
and it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. There's pictures time stamped, and it's just me sweating like a dirty old man, wearing a high vis jacket. And there's like my freighters behind me, my 767 for the band and crew is behind me. I had two business jets at the time for the artist party, and I'm alone on the ramp, just me
Oh,
and the four airplanes. And at this point, everyone's gone, the artist's gone, the band's gone, the freight's gone, and I'm just stood there and I'm like, I made this. And I turn around, I'm like, there's no one here. It's just me conducting this circus, you know.
Wow.
It's
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
terribly exciting. Sometimes it's the loneliest and most responsible job in the world.
Well, it's is it the classic like when everything goes right, it's the best job in the world,
Yeah,
and
of
when things
course.
start to go wrong, it potentially is one of the worst.
Yeah, I mean, if you the responsibility that we bear at times feels huge. You know, if you're
Hmm.
flying on a show
Yeah.
day and then there's, a weather problem or an aircraft breaks or something, the stress levels go up there. And I should
Yeah.
say, in 25 plus years of doing this for the music and entertainment world, I don't think I've ever missed a show. We've missed a sound check or two, but I don't think we've ever been responsible for not getting an artist to their show on time. And
Yeah.
part of what we do is to foresee problems and to highlight to an artist that maybe we could have a little bit more contingency in the schedule just to make us all feel a little bit more comfortable. And, that's our job to kind of troubleshoot. But there's always things that
Yeah.
you don't see coming. And, I talk about the loneliness of it, and life on the road is sometimes lonely. And I know that many music touring professionals will feel that also.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, they're always part of a larger organization. So, if I am down the line in Brazil somewhere at 2 a.m. and one of those planes break, I have an office full of people and 20 people can jump on the phone and help me out with that. And it's all hands to the deck. And that's what
Right.
everyone expects, right? That's what these artists are paying, and their lawyers and accountants and business managers and security people. That's what
Yep.
they're expecting. They're buying the backup, they're buying the reassurance, and that's why they're not flying commercial most of the time. Sometimes they're not flying because the route doesn't exist or it's too much of an issue in terms of security and privacy and connections and all of these other logistical reasons. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
I bet.
I say I get to play with two things I love most, music and planes. I'm a music geek plane spotter, so I'm in heaven.
That's an interesting overlap. So let's go back in time. 10-year-old Julie was 10-year-old Julie like, I want to fly, I want to do this. Or when did this materialize for you? This passion?
The passion for music definitely came first.
Hmm.
I always loved music. My parents used to love music, so this is back in the days of good old scratchy vinyl, So I used
Yeah,
to
yeah.
listen to a lot of my parents' music, and I used to rock out of my room pretending I was like the front woman in a band. So, like many people who work in this space, I also am a little bit of a musical creator. I used to sing back in the day, so I love the music side of things as well and the performance side of things. Um, I grew up in East London and pretty much in the hood. We weren't the kind of family who went flying off
Hmm.
anywhere at any time soon. We got in the car and went on vacation down to Cornwall, listening to more music. And I think I took my first flight when I was probably about 15, 16 years old. And that was
Okay.
totally exciting, just a family holiday to Spain or something. And, that was very exciting. And it's like my first experience abroad. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Even when I went to university, I didn't really know what I wanted to do for a living. And then I got a degree. It was like the mid 90s. I popped out of university. I was like, what do I do now? Like,
Now what?
where's my job? I was like, shit, I've got this debt now. I'm an indebted student. I've got myself the education. What do I do with it?
Yeah.
And so I sort of signed up for a temping agency at the time and I thought I'll go get some money under my belt while I think about my options. And actually, the agency that I was working with to pay off some of the debt, um, popped me into the marketing department of London City Airport. Um, which at the time was this tiny airport in East London downtown that had this
Yeah.
runway in the middle of the docks. It's if you ever get a chance to look at it online, guys, if you're plane
Yeah,
spotting.
I've been there. Yeah.
It's one of the most amazing flights. When you land into London City, because it's a steep approach, you're like, oh shit, did we land or were we shot down? It's like kind of crazy.
I
But
remember. Yeah.
so I got this job there and I was like, wow, this is incredible. There's all these airplanes coming and going, all these people scurrying back and forth in suits. It was like Metropolis. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
so evocative. And you had the smell of the aviation fuel when you had the city of London, or the new city of London, really, out of Canary Wharf, just being built up at the end of the
Yeah.
runway. And it was almost futuristic, and I was immediately hooked. Like just sight, smell, people traveling, and I got this job there that suddenly I was showing business travel agents around Europe. I was helping with the route development aspect of it. So it's like, okay, Jules, today your job is to go and take these 25 business travel agents on a jolly to Amsterdam for the day. We'll put you up in a 5-star hotel and we'll give you dinner. And you're just showing them the airplanes and the airports. And, so I went from, never having really flown anywhere to traveling to, most of the European business capitals. And I was like, right, this is it for me.
You're like, and I'm done.
Yeah, I want to go see the world. And here I was being paid to do it. So um, that was it. That's how I got into aviation and took some meanders through working at, from there I went to a business aviation airport. And there I was like, whoa, private jets, new world, hello. And I remember one of the very first kind of entertainment interactions I had was actually when I worked down at Biggin Hill and a Coldplay flight actually diverted because it was foggy at Stansted. And, with no notice whatsoever, very, very early careers Coldplay. We're talking yellow days Coldplay, kind of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
into Biggin Hill off this turboprop airplane. They're like, where are we? And I'm like, wow, it's Coldplay. And they were unfailingly polite as they have a reputation for being. And, this was, again, 20 odd years ago. And I thought, gosh, there's this whole other world out there. There's people who charter airplanes to get from A to B. And I then went over to the charter side
Yeah.
and very quickly found my niche with a company that specialized very heavily in music touring. And, my professional marriage was made at that point. Music and aviation, like, here we go.
Yeah, together. I love it. The was there because it sounds like there was a lot of learning on the job here,
Yes,
right? There's no touring artists aviation school to go to. So
absolutely.
can you
There
talk a
isn't
little
even an
about
water school, there is no blueprint for what we do because it is utterly bespoke. So, when it comes to kind of working in the music touring space in particular, ultimately we'll sit down with a tour manager, a production manager, and look at their schedule, look at the number of people. We're lucky sometimes they'll actually sit down at the very early stages, so we can almost, before they've actually, say, finalized venues and stuff, we can even suggest route optimizations for them to minimize travel, and say, rather than have like a dartboard routing, we can suggest something that's a little bit more linear, that is obviously
right?
less for the artist, it's better for the um, economical footprint of the tour, that sort of thing. But yeah, well, they'll give us a schedule and we'll look at airports and airplanes and ultimately you start out with this and you get to this and you get to this and then you get to this point here. We've suddenly said, okay, well, we want this plane and we want it for a month or 2 months or 6 months or however much it is. And, you become part of that touring world and it is all encompassing. It becomes your life 24/7, 365. And for that reason,
I
it's very,
bet. Yeah, it has
very
to.
intense because unlike you guys, when you go out with a tour, you're with it, and unless we're on a big plane where it needs a flight manager and we travel with it,
Right.
which I've done plenty of, most tours are smaller planes and you're managing them remotely. And there lies the challenge, really. You're trying to be a control freak of 1,051 things you have no direct control over. So airport slots, weather, plane, crew, personalities, whatever it might be.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
all of that. You're trying to be the puppeteer, but you can't see the puppets really. You can see half the strings.
I like that.
And when it's someone you don't like, you wish you had a really big pair of
Yeah,
scissors.
you'd be like, zip.
It's gone. This tour manager's an arsehole. And
I was trying so hard not to say that I bet it was the tour manager, and then you said it. So yeah,
to be
listen,
fair,
they do a job I could not do, so they
I
have
know.
all. I give them so much grace.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think the problem when you get to dealing with really high level tours is that you do find that a lot of artists are surrounded by yes people. And unfortunately, the
Mm,
operational reality of our world is that
yeah,
we can't always say yes to everything. You
yeah,
can't buy a slot or you can't bypass a vital immigration procedure. I don't mean anyone's trying to do anything illegal here, but you can get somewhere and say, okay, you got to go through the line when you arrive in Japan and
right.
they'll
It's just it
you
takes as long as it takes.
to give you
Yeah,
your visa on arrival and it doesn't matter, you could be the Pope, you still got to do it. So, there are things out
right.
there that people will find objectionable. Security screening. I've been at an FBO before, so that's like a small private jet terminal with a rap artist who's dripping in bling and stuff. And then he's like,
Oh,
I'm terribly sorry, sir, but you're going to have to remove your metal, your
my
belt,
God.
your shoes, your shades, your hat. It took him about 40 minutes to get dressed again after walking through the archway metal detector. Missed our slot now, but security around Europe is very strict. So if you're
Yeah.
flying privately in the US, it's super simple. You pretty much drive to the plane and you tell them who you are and you drive to the plane and off you go. Whereas
Yeah.
in Europe, it's the same kind of security rigmarole that you and I would go through for a scheduled flight, but that's to keep
For
everybody
anything.
safe.
Well,
So
and it makes sense, right? Because when you're thinking about, we're talking about just domestic flights within borders, it's very different than, because I always, as I like to say, the country I grew up in Europe is the size of Middle Tennessee. Like it's really hard to explain to folks this difference in scale
yeah, everything is
that you're
as natural
here.
in my world. I can drive into Teterboro, New York, and go, right, I'm flying on November 123 Alpha Bravo, and I'm going to Van Nuys, Los Angeles,
Yeah,
and they verify that, yeah, Judy Black is indeed on November 123 Alpha Bravo, and they drive me out, and they chuck my bag in the back, and we fire up engines 5 minutes later, and off we go.
yeah,
You know, Here you do a London to Paris, which is a 45-minute flight. You've got to go through security screening, you've got to go through customs, blah, blah, blah. There are private jet facilities to make that easier, but
yeah.
there's still some
Yeah,
essential sort of
it is
security.
that surprised me actually because I remember being on a band plane. I'll call it. It wasn't. It was a charter, obviously, out of the private airport in Nashville,
Okay.
and they just said, come here at this time. So I show up. I have a little bag, and I'm like ID, and they're like, we don't care. We know who you are. Just get on the plane. I'm like, really? Like, yep.
Well, it's funny
Zero,
you should
zero
say that
security.
because years ago I had a flight departing out of Van Nuys with a very well-known singer, and they were flying from Van Nuys to Houston, and I think I had basically cut a long story short. I had a call from a security guy. I was like, "What the fuck?" Sorry, I don't have a swear on this,
Oh
and
no, please say
okay,
whatever the fuck you
cool.
want.
Yeah. So he was like freaking out. I was like, man, what's the problem? And he was like, there's someone on our fucking plane. I was like, what do you mean there's someone on your plane? And basically, there were two Gulfstreams going from Van Nuys to Houston. And luckily, he'd gone out as advanced security because he went out to the airplane and found there were four ladies sat on the plane and they were on the wrong plane.
Oh
And
no.
I know it was because like the captain was like filing his flight plan. First officer had his
Right, it's
head
just like nobody's fault.
like,
It's just
yeah, he
a
was like
mistake.
rearranging
Yeah.
the bags because he knew that my passenger was coming with shitloads of bags, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
flight attendant was in the FBO getting ice or something. So the linesman took a quick check and took a gamble: is it this one or that one? Chose the wrong plane, and I get screamed at from 11 hours away in Los
Yeah.
Angeles. Someone on my fucking plane.
Those women must have been like, what is happening?
Yeah, there's these poor ladies kind of going, did we do something wrong?
Yeah.
You didn't, honey. Somebody screwed up.
What are the kind of things? Because when I think about just project management, when in my job, my day job, I always, you have all the things that need to happen. You know what your outcome has to be. And then you have what kind of usually gets called the critical path, right? What are all of the things that have to happen in this order in order for you to get to that end goal? So when you first sit down with tour manager or artist manager, or whoever needs to be in the room, lawyers, I'm assuming, is what are the things that need to get locked down early? What are those early decisions? And what are things where you can create more flexibility? Or is it kind of everything is sort of equally important and it's really not possible?
Well, I mean, generally, obviously, the one thing that really can't be changed is these are the shows that the artist is playing.
Right.
Those are normally fixed in time and space. So then we've got to look at whether they want to be doing hit and runs, whether they're hubbing somewhere and going to show cities as they go along, or whether they're going from city to city, whether they want to fly on show days, whether they want to fly off after show to the next city. And those kind of set out a lot of the operational parameters at the beginning for us because whether you can fly late from an airport. I always say in the States, if you want to fly from a city, probably every city has 5 airports, every airport has 5 runways, and everything
Mm.
is easy. Here in Europe, aviation is much more restricted. Um, and everything's international. So if you need customs and you need these
Right.
people available at hours, and then all our cities are, very densely populated. So there's communities around the airport. So a lot of airports aren't 24 hours anymore. So some
Yeah.
cities fly after show, some cities you can't. And often the band will come to you, or whomever on behalf of them will come to you with an ideal scenario, going, yeah, we want a hub in London. So, for these first five shows in like London, Edinburgh, Paris, Milan, whatever, we're going to fly to and from London. And then we'll be like, right, well, actually, we can't fly after show back into London because by the time you come back, all the airports are shut. Sorry, because
Yeah.
your stage time's too late. We'll sometimes we'll work out there's mutual compromise to get where they want to be. So right away, we're looking at the sort of operational criteria. We're then combining that with preferences on airplane that could be dictated by the size of the party, by the baggage or freight capacity, if that's a
Yeah.
feature. And then you get to a point where an artist has preferences on age or type or that sort of thing. Sometimes we might just be traveling with a fairly small party. Sometimes we'll travel with a huge party,
Mhm.
taking their family. Back in the day, I used to fly the Rolling Stones, and that was a party of 50 and 200 bags, and that whole entourage went all the way around.
Yeah. That's
Most
a lot
people
of
don't
people to
travel.
coordinate.
That was my very first tour I did. It was a Rolling Stones tour on a VIP 757. So there's your baptism of fire right there.
Oh, that is not a small plane.
Yeah.
You already alluded to it, but I'm curious about this now. So we've all been, when we're all flying commercial, we've been at the airport where ding, flight is delayed by X many hours. Or, because I live in Colorado, our airport occasionally shuts down. Oh, snowstorm.
Yeah.
How does everybody communicate when things like this happen? Because I'm assuming you don't just have one person in the air at any one time, right? There's multiple flying parties flying. There's multiple tours happening, especially kind of now in like festival season. How does everybody communicate? How do you keep the threads going? How do you keep everybody calm?
God, it's so
To
funny because communication is so easy now, isn't it? Now we've all got WhatsApp or Telegram or Signal or whatever people are
Yeah,
using.
yeah.
You can create broadcast channels client side. I mean, I've done tours where I have five or six different WhatsApp groups. You've kind of got a security group, then you might have the management group, then you might have the PAs, and then
Oh, interesting.
you've got the
Yeah,
same groups, kind of the operator side, and you then internally in your own team for
yeah.
everyone. So, there's no excuse for being ill-informed about anything, and there's in our world, there's no excuse for being ill-prepared about anything. So things like weather and slots and stuff, we should be able to see those in advance. Now,
Right.
today or in the moment, I mentioned to you earlier, the weather is unseasonably hot in Europe, some 35-degree temperatures, yeah, which are no doubt going to be smashed to pieces at some point by some huge thunderstorms. And those are probably going to create some disruption somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
It might not be that any of our flights this weekend are directly affected by stormy weather, but it might well be that they're affected by knock-on air traffic delays from, sort of
Right.
being rerouted around thunderstorms over the European airspace. So, some things will cause indirect knock-on effects. And again, part of that is about continuous monitoring of operation, continuous monitoring of the weather. The one thing, well, there's always things I can do nothing about. I can do nothing about the airplane braking. I can do
Right.
nothing about a drummer breaking his leg. I can do nothing about there being a wreck on the freeway on the way to the airport and the passengers being late or the crew being late. There's always
Yeah.
things we can't control, but you can mitigate most things. And, knowing our market well, if I'm, at an airport in Germany and the plane breaks, then straight away we know who the operators are in Germany and where their planes are based to think, well, who's my first call to is going to help me get me out of this mess. And as I say, in 25 plus years, I've never failed to get an artist
Yeah,
to the,
yeah. Everybody made the show.
yeah.
The I'm curious now that you're talking is that innate to you? Like, were you like this? Or did the working in this industry teach you this, right? The sort of
Yeah.
to being fairly even and that's a problem that has a solution and we'll figure it out and we'll stay calm and is that something you brought with you? You were already like this, or working in this job kind of taught you to have that attitude?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I am by very nature a highly excitable and adrenalized person. So I think that means that although I love things to go well, I also thrive under stress because I'm kind of used to dealing with it on so
Right.
many levels. So I think we're equipped to deal with that. But, the end game is always to get the artist to the venue and on stage to, step
Right.
out onto that stage and play to 55,000 people. And, we never lose sight of the artistic integrity, the conscience that the artist has, the obligation that everyone has to those 55,000 people and the hundreds of dollars that they've spent to be there. So everything that we do is shaped to make that happen. And yes, it means being prepared for everything. I think in 25 years, I've probably seen most things. There'll always be something that surprises me. I had to delay a flight once because the artist's eyelashes flew out the window of the car. He wound it down to smoke out the window, and we had to pause for an eye restyle that
So
was
an
mid.
eyelash recovery operation.
There was an eyelash. They never found the eyelashes, but they had to restyle because she didn't want to walk into the jet terminal without eyelashes. So we had to, yeah, we
Yeah.
had to pause, and she learned to smoke with the window closed, much to the chagrin of the people around her. But
Yeah, probably. They're like, let's weigh the thing, smoke in the car, eyelashes. But it's
yeah,
the thing too is like, because as you said, she didn't walk out into the terminal without eyelashes. And part of my brain is like, oh, does it really matter? Just make your plane. And then the other part of my brain is going like, well, it does actually, because there might be photographers, there might be fans, there might be, they have to control all this aspect of their lives.
yeah.
And if we work with artists, we have to accept that that's their reality, right?
Yeah, I mean,
It's,
I wouldn't
yeah,
be
talk
famous
about
for
that.
anything, having had a lot of contact with people in the music and entertainment space, especially now, and that's, we do a lot of motion
Yeah,
picture work as well. I would not be famous for anything. I think,
same.
30 years ago, it was different. When the worst somebody might do is like, sign my t-shirt. Can you sign my napkin or whatever it was? But now
Right.
everyone's, in your space, like, take a selfie with me, and this goes for like customs officials and police officers and all that shit as well. It's not just your average.
Custom, that's just inappropriate.
It is, but it happens, It absolutely happens. And
Yeah.
I remember a few years ago now, I had another very high profile singer who was actually traveling without his security. He was kind of on a bit of a personal mission and he was coming in from the Caribbean into, I think, somewhere like Atlanta, somewhere on the East Coast. It was fairly kind
Yeah.
of low key, but they didn't have like a VIP meet and greet service. And I was thinking, oh my God, this guy's going to come in on a scheduled flight from the Caribbean, carrying his own bags. He's got no security with him. He's got no
Yeah.
PA. He's going to get absolutely fucking rushed in arrivals. Like, how
Yeah.
do I prevent that? And I thought, right, what can I do to make him safe? And and it was there was nothing that he was going to go around to the private jet facility, but those guys weren't allowed to go airside into the terminal to pick him up from customs. So he was whatever was going to happen, he was going to have to do
Right.
customs and baggage by himself. Um, and I thought this is crazy. And there was no VIP service back in those days for anybody that would actually go and like meet him and keep him safe and whisk him away or do things for him. So in the end, I came up with the idea of speaking to the local police department. And I was like, can you guys like meet him and just like shadow him or something? Just
Good
so he
idea.
doesn't get attacked or, and I don't mean attacked like attacked.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
just mobbed by
just
people who want
mocked, thank you,
pictures and
better word.
yeah.
Yeah. And I told the tour manager what I was doing, and she was like, "Yeah, that's really smart. We're cool, good." And then about on the day of flight, so it was planned a couple of days prior, and then on the day of flight, I thought, "Shit, he's going to be on the front page of all the papers. They're going to go, blah blah blah, arrested on arrival
Yeah,
from the
with the police,
capital
with like
story."
the police.
And that never happened. But
Okay. Whew.
I suddenly realized that perhaps that wasn't such a wise move. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that would have been cool. Good pictures to,
yeah,
but that's
front page of the Sun.
oh God.
I,
That's not a
I
thing I miss from England. The tabloids, not something I miss.
oh man, no, they're good. Another little story a few years ago when I was doing a tour around South America for U2 actually, and I can say that because it's years gone by, and we had this scenario whereby we had to take some of their baggage through customs. So sort of random stuff that was kind of not freight, but it was kind of personal stuff. And they were going off in limousines and whisked off to go to downtown to their hotels. And myself and some of my colleagues were wheeling some of their stuff through customs. And then you go through customs, and we had to go through the terminal because this was in Buenos Aires, so there was no private jet terminal there. We had to get it out to their vans. And I had this small wheel, probably about 1 meter cube, kind of like metal wheelie case, a standard flight case. And of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
the tour logo on it. And everyone knew they were coming to town. In this case, they weren't, it wasn't a billboard flying billboard liveried up plane, but everyone knew they were coming to town. And it was like you get fans camp out at the airport. And I was wheeling this thing through the airport. And I had like the longest 300-meter journey to make with this bloody
Yeah,
box
yeah.
from the arrivals to the van out the side. And I had these people running after me screaming, Bono, Bono. And I was like, fuck me, he's small, but he's not in the box.
He's like, I'm not wheeling him out of.
Yeah.
That's really funny. I thought this is how we transport our artists.
Yeah,
Just to
absolutely.
be safe.
Real low key. Although there is, interestingly, a story about some corrupt executive years ago who did exactly that. He chartered a plane and pretended to be music equipment, and he flew in a box. So, it has been done.
Okay. I'm assuming that worked out for that person
No,
somewhat.
he got caught, which was right. He should have. He was a criminal. But
Okay. Crime.
yes,
Great.
crime. And it wasn't us. We didn't do it. But, there was a precedent right there for man in box.
That's actually because I didn't think of this, but now that we took it into this direction is like what I can imagine might also be a challenge on tours is, let's say, certain substances that artists might want with them, and then you
Uh-huh.
fly to another country where that maybe isn't welcome. Is how much is that a concern? Because, maybe this is a question for the lawyers, but I'm sort of, if you're flying into a place and they're flying on your plane and somebody brought something
Yeah.
that they shouldn't have been bringing, does that create liability for you, or is the company protected? And if you can't answer that, that's fine. I'm just curious
No,
about that
I
now.
mean, at all times it's up to passengers to act lawfully, right? And to
Right.
avail themselves of the law of where they're going from, where they're coming from, and where they're going to. And, we are not responsible for that. So I did years ago have a movie promo ongoing in Asia. And I had a principal artist who traveled from one Asian country into Australia, and some medication that he took with him from the Asian country to Australia was deemed illegal when he landed in Australia, and he didn't know
Oh,
about it. It They were steroids, basically, like bodybuilding steroids. So
yeah, yeah.
and he was arrested for it. But at the time, my crew was arrested for my aircraft was impounded and the stuffing was taken out the cushions and all kinds of drama.
Oh
That
man.
was a call you want at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. By the way, he's been arrested. So have my crew.
And the plane is being torn to pieces while they
Yeah,
try to find some
exactly. I
other
mean,
stuff. Like,
it was all done very civilly in the end, and he
yeah,
was ignorant into the situation because the medication he was using was legal in other places that he'd used it.
yeah,
There are always issues, and a lot of recreational drugs are legal at a lot of places and illegal in others, and that's for any of our clients to figure out. It's not for us. There's lots of great
yeah.
stories out there about people who flying artists who are getting high as a kite whilst flying, and the crews have like landed the plane saying we can't inhale this stuff secondhand. It's dangerous to us. But I've never had the mispleasure of being involved in one of those flights, thank God.
Good. Yeah, because I can't imagine that that's fun.
Yeah.
Let's switch over to the future. Because just before we started recording, you were talking about, aviation has been involved in music for a long time, and I'm assuming will continue to be. Where do you see the role of aviation in touring? How do you see it evolving?
I think if you like, there's less visibility but greater need. I think that's the best way of putting it.
Hmm.
Scheduled services and airports just get busier and busier. So it's harder and
Right.
harder to get groups of people from A to B to C to D at the times that they need to be there.
Yeah.
Particularly post-COVID, a lot of regional air services have been reduced. So, a lot of stuff that, especially European festival season, where people have been dependent upon little hub and spoke
Mm.
services, those just don't exist anymore. And that's where charter comes in really well. And if you're one of those kind of like mid-band artists, not like your headliner, you're, 3 or 4 lines down the itinerary,
Yeah.
then your life depends on you playing 3 or 4 gigs every weekend, and those people are probably using charter almost as much as the larger artists, because that's the way that they can squeeze all those festivals in. And I think also, if you look at emerging markets, the Asian market has really expanded a lot in the last couple of years. I mean, I think Coldplay just played something like 2 million people in India on their tour down there, the last
Hmm.
couple of months, for example. So, but they weren't just playing in, like Delhi or Mumbai. Now they're playing in like other cities as well. I think you're seeing other cities like Thailand and Vietnam and Cambodia and Malaysia and Singapore and Hong Kong. The amount of live entertainment in those countries, and the demand for it and the enthusiasm for it, mostly kind of perpetuated by, the fact that our entertainment is now so much more consumable because everyone has a phone, and,
Right.
everyone can see stuff and follow stuff on social media and all of that. And it's incredible, that if you like, the artist's reach is now endless. It's not just dependent upon the promoters and the record companies. And, if you're sat in, in Borneo, if you're in Indonesia and you want to consume country music from Nashville, you can do it. It doesn't matter that there's no Nashville artists coming to Borneo.
Yeah.
So, but what that does create is the appetite and enthusiasm and energy for people to actually travel to those places. So, I think there will be greater need. I think there's an obvious conflict, and I know we're probably going to talk about this in terms of sustainability. Um,
Literally the next point on my outline.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a bit of
Exactly.
a, I don't think anybody in their right mind can look at travel in any way, shape, or form and think that it is, you know, purely good for the environment. It's not, of
Right.
course it's not.
Exactly.
But you have to look at the benefits that, a touring artist brings to an economy in terms of regeneration economy, the visibility for certain places, the people that they
Yeah.
employ, and then the people that are employed beyond that in the wider music and entertainment sector, but also in the transport sector. At the end of the day, um, aviation, and particularly the business aviation world, are probably always at the cutting edge of innovation. If you look at most of the kind of environmental improvements that have been made to big airlines, they've all started in the business aviation world soon. So the winglets that all the airliners have now, we've got the wing and then you've got this bit at the end here, which
Yeah.
increases the efficiency and all of that. Those started small on business jets first, and they get scaled up. So
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, and the first
Interesting.
electric plane will obviously be a small one. It will be a business jet. It won't be it'll be a very, very, very long time before mass passenger transport can be powered by alternate power plants. But the developments always start small. So, we'll be doing our bit in that regard. The challenge here is that, if you look at, most artists are, encouraged to display their green credentials, and then that's an obvious conflict, visually at least,
Yeah.
in terms of flying. But so I think less visibility, that's why we don't see those lovely liveried up airplanes anymore. But the need is greater. And I think as long as we all continue to do our bit with the much bigger picture of what we do, then, we're perhaps all perpetuating the positivity about what we do, rather than the kind of the things that people obviously knock aviation for.
Yeah. Do you see Do you see a trend, or is it increasing? Because, Coldplay got mentioned before. Do you see a trend of artists themselves saying, we want a carbon neutral tour? Okay, well, we have to fly. Therefore, we're going to offset this other way, right? Which is not your problem to solve. But do you see a trend where artists are becoming more and more, not just for themselves, but actually publicly really pushing the idea of sustainability? Yes, we have to have the flights because that's just a reality, but then we're doing this other stuff. Or when it comes to like cargo, because I was just thinking about, some of these large, like you mentioned, Rolling Stones, right? These tours that have the the stage sets that you're not going to rebuild in Europe. You need to ship what you have,
Yeah,
or the other
absolutely.
way around, right? They built it in Europe, they need to ship it. Say like you're touring Japan, you that needs to go somewhere. Does that go on a freighter? Does that go on a C-130? Like, how does that stuff get to where it needs to go?
Yeah, I mean, you often find if there's enough of a gap in a schedule, if there's a 3 month gap between the European tour and the South America tour, then sometimes people will split their freight and send it over and schedule freight. There are scheduled freight services as well. But
Right.
more often than not, because of the importance of keeping everything together and making sure it's not damaged, making sure the cargo is not broken down and elements of it are lost, then generally, that will be going on a freighter somewhere. So yes,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, as you correctly identify, people are looking to offset what they do in a myriad of other ways through contributions to offsetting projects or reforestation. And, that's
Yeah.
a huge topic that people choose to engage with and people choose to activate in ways that are meaningful to them, I think. And I think the wonderful thing about the entertainment world is that I think it's always been incredibly philanthropic and it's always been incredibly aware and has been ahead of and in front of the game on all manner of issues. And I love that. So um, when it comes to aviation, the genie came out of the bottle years and years ago. It's not going to
Mm.
go back in.
Yeah.
And aviation is an amazing thing. It connects communities and it reunites families and it allows us to travel and explore other cultures. And it enables us to take, entertainment artists around the world and perform live in front of millions of people on multitude of continents. And that's utterly joyful. And if you've ever been to one of those big
Yeah.
stadium shows where there's 60,000 people jumping up and down, and, a few of them, normally including myself, are bawling their eyes out because you're just in that moment of emotional overwhelm. I think that is
Yeah.
priceless, absolutely priceless. And that just brings everybody together. It's joyful.
It does. It matters. And I remember being at a conference a couple of years ago, and people were, the conversation was around this, right? Where it was like, how much does it really matter? And somebody's like, oh, we're not curing diseases over here. And then somebody interjected and it's like, but it actually does matter. Like, we entertain people.
Yeah.
That is a mental health thing for a lot of folks. It actually truly matters. Like, the work we do puts people on stages, brings joy, gives, that little mental health boost of the
100%.
serotonin boost of going to shows, is like, it actually does matter. Like, we shouldn't be kind of denigrating our work here. Is like, yeah, sure, we're not in hospitals curing diseases, but this actually does matter. And it's what you just said reminded me of that.
It does. I mean, if you've ever been to a Coldplay concert or a Harry Styles concert, they're the most joyous things you will ever attend. Everyone's loving each other and hugging each
Yeah.
other, and they might or Taylor Swift or whatever. There's the little routines and the little rituals that go with that, whether it be the wristbands or the dressing in this color or wearing this, that. It just brings
Yeah.
everyone together. And roll back, 6, 7 years ago when we were just going into a pandemic and had no idea how our kind of time away from the world was going to be so difficult for us. And,
Yeah.
music and entertainment got a lot of people through that. And, you know, let's not be afraid of getting together in a stadium again and experiencing that moment of joy. I have teenage daughters, and one of the things they love more than anything is going to a live music show, and it's
There's
a
nothing
huge
like it.
no, there really is nothing like it. And I think we will probably remember the first album we bought or the first concert that we went to. And,
Yeah.
these things just, they're incredible. I have a personal view that I think music in many ways is almost getting a little bit too big. I think it's hard now. If you're a teenager, you want to go see a show and, your bottom line ticket's $200 to go, sit in the gods or
Yep.
stand back. And that's a whole other issue. Let's not make it too big business. Let's remember it's about the music and the ability of the artist to connect with their audience because it's yeah, I love being part of the music industry and I think it's a joy. It's a personal joy, but it's knowing that you say that we brought that joy to, the 80,000 people that are there that night jumping up and down.
Yeah, for sure. Um, let's wrap up on, if people, if the folks are listening to this, and go, I like planes, I like music. How do I get into this? What are some paths that you think that you would advise people to take, if this is something that they'd like to pursue?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, we're quite a low visibility, low profile part of the aviation industry as a whole.
Right.
Technically, my job on paper would be air charter broker, and everyone would go, "Ooh, what's that?" And also broker is a bit of a dirty word because it implies you're just buying and selling, and wheeler dealing, and it's
Yeah, yeah.
everything but that. That's for sure. You're much more of a sort of facilities, logistics, like you say, therapist, counselor, accountant, meteorologist. You name it,
Yeah.
juggler, magician, manifester, all of those things. But if you've got, for people who want to follow the aviation path, I'd say, there's university degrees in aviation management and that sort of thing. But the best thing is just to get out there and get some experience. Go to airports, see what happens, get a job pushing around planes at the flight school, go to gigs. Keep involved in the live music industry. You can't just turn up and expect to kind of walk into a job where you're procuring a private jet for Madonna or whatever it might be. At
Right,
the end of the
exactly.
day, you've got to do your research, you've got to engage with the industry, you've got to be informed. But most importantly, you have to be a people person. I have so many people work for me that started out working, bussing tables in bars or selling cars or whatever it might be. Some of
Yeah.
the people in this job aren't people for whom aviation was a first choice career, but they're really good at the human relationship and the human interaction. For me to make a tour work, I have to understand the motivations and the fears and the joy points of everybody on that tour. A tour
Uh-huh.
manager has his own pressures, the artist has their own pressures, the accountant has their own pressures, the promoters have theirs.
Yeah.
Everyone has these different accountabilities and motivations, and you have to be a human being first and foremost who understands that. And the other thing I've learned is you can't change people. You can't,
Oof. Yeah.
right? You can never change people. So you've got to follow your gut. And if you're an open person who's willing to learn and has got a good instinct for people and loves interacting with people, then this is certainly the job for you. And if you love to travel, even better. Don't come and tell me that you're a great salesperson, but you can't look me in the eye and your CV was written by AI and you don't know how to spell Gothenburg. Like, see ya.
That feels like that's a real example.
Mm.
It's a very,
Yeah.
we will not get into it. But it does, and it's something that, I've said this in different industries because it's true everywhere, no matter what your industry is, where people have like, oh, I'm in this business, like I'm in the music business, I'm in the aviation business, I'm in the transport business. No, you're in the people business.
Absolutely.
Always first, right? It's always first
Yeah.
to people. So where do you think like the transferable skills are? If somebody's says like, they were a salesperson and you need to bring in a salesperson or you need to bring in a marketing person. What are kind of the transferable skills from other jobs, other industries? You already highlighted, right? Being really good with people and being understanding of their pressures, their stresses, and not try to change them.
Yeah.
What else is there?
I mean, you have to have the passion for aviation and the passion for music for sure. But I
Hmm.
mean, so many of the qualities that are the most important ones are those soft people skills. So,
Right.
tenacity, creativity, being a team player, being selfless, understanding that this isn't a 9 to 5 job. When people are kind of
Yes.
looking, oh, it's 5:29, I better go wash my cup up and leave, bye. Not the right job for you because tomorrow night
Right.
you get a call at 2 a.m. that breaks your world in three and you've got to make a solution like that. Be ready
Yeah.
to go. Ping out of bed, act like you're on it. Yeah, I think you've got to be excitable, you've got to be responsive, you've got to be enthusiastic. It's not a job for shrinking violets, that's for sure. Sometimes I have to go stand in front of some of the biggest egos in the world and tell them that I have a
And
problem
tell them no.
solving, and I
Yeah.
prefer not to present problems. I prefer to present solutions, and
Yeah.
everyone in my team would say the same thing. I've got something like 25 people who work in my space who are all dealing with the same problems, in various places around the world. And that's another
Uh-huh.
thing, geography is very important. Tours these days, it's not just Europe, it's America, it's South America, it's
Right.
Asia, Middle East, Africa. All of these markets now can be reached and have their own consumers. And that's very, very exciting. I love that.
I do now think that I did forget something that I wanted to ask you. So if you have
Oh,
a couple of more minutes,
yeah,
is the association you're a part of where one of your focuses is to elevate and bring in more women into this industry. Can you talk a
cool.
little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things I do away from the day-to-day chartering is I'm deputy chair of a voluntary organisation called the Air Charter Association. And we are essentially like a member association representing the interests of people in the charter space. So, mostly charter operators and charter brokers, and then some
Mhm.
tertiary suppliers, so airports, FBOs, that kind of thing. And we're essentially self-regulating. We train people coming into the industry, and we try to make sure that everyone works together in a harmonious way. Um, as you might imagine, aviation, like music, is a very male space. And I
Right.
originally got involved with the association just over 10 years ago now because there weren't any women on the board. And I used to go
Zero?
to zero at that point. Yeah, there were
Wow.
15 board members, all of whom were male. And I can't tell you how interesting that selection interview was when I walked into this great big board table. 15 guys sat around it. And at that point, the association was very much, networking events, and we'd go to these networking events, and I'd look at 450 people in a room, and probably 420 were male, which was
Right.
immense. Now, I do have to say, aviation, like many other industries, is changing, and there are more women in the room, and that's a wonderful thing. I like to think we live in a meritocratic society and that everyone is where they are on merit. But there is no doubt that, so there are still more men in the working world than there are women.
Yeah.
It is changing. I don't think it's changing in the boardroom as quickly as it is on the trading floor or around the FBOs and that, but it's getting better. I get invited to a lot of conferences to speak as an expert in my field on aviation or music touring, and also as a woman in aviation and a woman who's promoting aviation careers to young women who might have an interest in aviation as a career.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud to be an ambassador for all of those things. But first and foremost, I think it's important that everyone gets where they are in the world on the back of their own strengths and capabilities. And for me, as a woman and a queer woman as well, I'm very happy to be out there and promoting, my own strengths and capabilities and the strengths and capabilities of the amazing people that work with me.
I like that. Somebody yesterday um, said something, lift as you rise. I wrote it down
Oh,
because it was
I love that.
so
That's
good.
beautiful.
That was like, oh, I
Beautiful.
love that. That I was like, that's such a great way of how do you think about that? Sort of as you got more opportunities, right? You build your career, you create your additional strengths, you show your strengths, you become more visible to
Yeah.
maybe the people who were the gatekeepers of your industry. How do you think about creating that ladder for women to come up alongside you or behind you as you grow? You create a path for other women. How do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's important just to share the joy of what you do. If everyone can see that you got where you are on merit and you got
Yeah.
where you are because you love what you do and you became good at what you do, then talent will rise, whoever the talent may be. And I think that's really, really important. If you lead by example, well, she made it. Why can't I? I'm a girl
Yeah,
from
yeah, yeah.
the end of London. I probably shouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. And, I'm a board director of two companies and I'm terribly proud of that. And, you know, I have a wife and two teenage daughters. We're all a bit girl power anyway, but, you know,
Yeah.
I always like to tell my daughters that, the possibilities for them are endless. You're not limited by, you shouldn't be limited by anything. And, we're very fortunate now in that I think that young people now don't have some of the struggles that, we had years ago.
Hmm.
But there are obvious gender differences and gender imbalances that will probably
Yeah.
never fully work out. But I think it's also quite important not to have a chip on our shoulder about that and just get on through positivity. I think it's
Yeah.
like positivity versus protesting, isn't it? Sometimes you can kind of it sounds awful if I say moan a little bit too much, but rather than going around with a chip on the shoulder, it's like, I'm going to make something of this chip and I'm just going to show everyone how damn proud I am of what I do and how much I enjoy what I do. And, you know, if that means that other people come on that journey with me, then I'm happy. It should be organic.
It is, but the thing too is like the visibility piece, right? Because if
Yeah.
you think like, okay, my teenage daughters are maybe aspire to a career in whatever it is, if they look at that industry and don't see women or see maybe one among 500,
Yeah.
that sends a message to them So the
Yeah,
more, like you said, right, if you are just showing up doing the job, being visibly seen to be doing the job really well and climbing in your career, and you happen to be a woman, that creates that visibility. That's like, oh, I can do that too. Because
yeah.
look, there's other women doing this. I think the visibility of it really does matter.
Very much so. And, many tour managers we deal with now at the very highest level are women. And, 25 years ago, when I first started
Oh,
working in this
zero.
space,
Yeah.
that wasn't the time. And, it won't surprise you to hear me say, I think women are great tour managers because I think we're naturally multitasking and we're very
Right.
good at seeing the softer stuff and the humanity of it. And I think the humanity and the emotion and the human motivations and everything are something that has been overlooked for years in every industry. Now we're all talking about mental health and stuff, whereas for years it was like, oh, pull your trousers up, get on with it. Actually, that's not
Yeah.
really the case because everybody, even men, have human motivations and fears and confidences and lack of confidences and all of those things.
Right.
So, um, I think it's definitely about merit, but women are better at seeing some of those things that nobody's really been seeing for a very long time. And I think that naturally makes us very good at those attention to detail jobs.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.